Good afternoon. Hello, welcome back to my channel. My name is Jeff. I'm sure some of you recognize me. And of course, I'm sure everyone here probably recognizes my very special guest, Mr. Chris Shelton, MSc. Uh, Today, we're going to be having a cool little conversation about recovery, a boot recovery.
Yes, the Canadian comes through.
It does come through every time. And the more people point it out, the more I notice it. So yeah. So we're gonna be having a conversation today about recovery and predominantly about Chris would like to know about my recovery and certain milestones and so forth that I feel I have reached and perhaps some future ones. Particularly given the fact that I just joined in a massive protest against Scientology, the largest protest against Scientology in the UK since 2008, I believe.
Yeah,
So about
anonymous.
15 years.
Yeah.
And it was a major flap for Mr. Flappy McFlapperface, Captain David Miscavige, who is right here, by the way, made his way all the way back from the UK, safe and sound. I smuggled him across the border like I was smuggled across the border when I was 14 years old.
Awesome.
Yeah, so that's the plan today. If you guys have any questions or comments and would like to have us bring up certain things, feel free to pop it into the chat and we'll take them up at the end unless it makes sense to bring them up immediately. And before we get started, please just do keep in mind that both Chris and I are fan funded. And the only reason that we can keep doing this kind of thing is your guys' support. And the best way to do that would be to like and subscribe as well. If you'd like to support us in a financial manner, you can. You can buy myself a coffee. There is a link in the description. And Chris, of course, has all the things in his description as well.
All the things.
And all the things. And he's got this amazing book that everybody should definitely buy. And he is going to show that off here. It is Scientology A to Xenu, and it is the definitive guide of all things Scientology. It is quite amazing. So do check that out. With all that fun stuff being said, Chris,
Yes.
It's good to see you again, my friend.
Oh, it's so good to see you. And it was such a pleasure to talk to you guys. When you went over there, I had no idea you were going. It was such a shock that your face popped up. And Alex was clearly excited. And,
yes.
And it I think he was double excited for both of you.
It was pretty cool. And I'm going to be doing a video a little bit later on, kind of digesting and debriefing a little bit, other stuff and not what we're talking about today, but I'll be doing that later on this afternoon. So if you guys want to watch that, you can join. But I will say that meeting Alex in person was really great. Him and I had been talking kind of on the side. And of course, he helped me significantly with my channel as far as making sure that I got coverage. And he's been very supportive. He's a lovely man. And we had a lot of fun and we drank a few pints. So
there you go. What more could you ask for, right?
Yeah. I mean, taking down Scientology was fun too, but
Well, exactly. Hey, let me ask you actually, this just occurred to me, like, okay, so, you basically put yourself on a kind of mission in going over there, meeting with Alex, figuring out the plan and then executing it. It wasn't just a vacation you went on. There was a plan and a program, and you guys followed it, and you guys did amazing. But I'm curious, how did this whole experience outside of Scientology and the Sea Org compare with, when you're in the Sea Org and you're going on a mission and you're going to far off places or exotic lands or whatever, or at least some place you've never been before, and doing a project or getting a program done or anything? Did you do that kind of work when you were in the Sea Org? And did this how did the whole attitude and everything of it compare?
Yeah, I mean, I didn't do it in the Sea Org as I was only on the EPF and I was never sent out to projects. But
oh right, you never did go on a okay. Yeah.
No, I was not quite strong enough. No, I smartened up too quickly to actually fulfill my contract. But I definitely was given a lot of projects and so forth on staff as Class 5 orgs, and of course, I worked on projects sent down directly by David Miscavige, like the Golden Age of Knowledge program. which essentially was saying you have to make sure every single public buys, listens, reads all the materials, within a certain amount of time. And yes, I did go over there specifically just for this protest. I didn't go there for vacation. I did some sightseeing, but predominantly it was preparing for the protest, making sure everything was, helping in the way that I could with Alex to make sure everything was going smoothly, as well as setting as much as I could the tone for the protest to help out, make sure it was peaceful, and the message got across that we were there to help people, not necessarily just to yell at them and yell the usual Xenu stuff and so forth. Because I don't
Right.
find that's an effective way to get Scientologists' attention. Um, it was it was, but I think the difference is it was volitional. It was my decision to do this.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't under any kind of duress, which is the difference between doing a project or some sort of task in Scientology as a staff member. Is you are just expected to do it no matter what, right? Like when I was on the front line and I was talking to these Scientologists coming in and out of the event, I was just saying things that I wanted to say when I wanted to say them, and I didn't have a specific message that I had to say. Um, I just wanted to do it how I felt I wanted to do it, and I feel like I did that.
Yeah.
And so the thought of I want to say self gratification, I suppose, in this regard, like this is what I wanted to do, not what someone else wanted me to do,
Yeah.
was good. And I never received that when I was on staff, and I was
Right.
told to do something. It was always looking for approval of someone else versus just myself. So I guess that
That
was.
makes a lot of sense. That makes a lot of sense. It's a good point you make there at the end on that too, because it's not like we were sending our. I mean, I went on a lot of missions as a Sea Org member, but
Mm.
only one of them was one that I actually initiated,
Oh, really?
which ended up being the best one I went on, right? Because I was so excited about it. But every other one was, somebody else is dragging you in and going, okay, here's what's happening, and you're going, and okay, I guess I'm going now, and off you go. So yeah, big difference in wanting to do it, of course.
Yeah. And I think that's anything in life. Like if you don't
Yeah.
want to do something, then it's hell. But if you want to do it, then it's good, right?
Yeah,
And when
exactly.
you
Well, and it can be. It can be. There's another thing I was thinking about in terms of the organization of it, because you guys pulled off some pretty cool stuff. Now, I don't know all the ins and outs and last minutes and the thises and that's of all the things you went through. I know you guys will break that down for us in the future, but from what I observed from a distance, it was organized, it was chill, it was well organized, and
Mhm.
the signage, of course, everybody was commenting on the signage and how great it was.
Yeah.
But it was the attitude that seemed to imbue the whole thing that I was most happy about.
Yes.
Which you commented on there, right? It's like not about antagonistic and let's throw Xenu in everybody's face and let's make fun of and let's ridicule these people. It's when you guys were saying we love you, I was just like, oh my god, I'm going to start crying. This is perfect. Like this is
Yeah.
exactly how you should be talking to these people, right? Because it's exactly the opposite of what they expect.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and they certainly didn't expect us to be there for 3 days and doing that as well, but
Right.
surprisingly, because it was announced and it was advertised, but, yeah, Alex did such an amazing job on the organization, the signs, like, that was all him. I take 0 credit for that at all. Um, I knew what things were gonna be happening before they'd happened, and of course, everything had to be remain kind of tight-lipped. Not everything,
Yeah.
but a lot of stuff.
Yeah.
And there's even more now that has to remain tight-lipped as well, just to make sure that things get handled in the proper way. But
Yeah.
certainly, um, I can also take no credit for the attitude, except for what I, of course, put through,
I
because
think you
everybody
should take
there.
some. Now, hang on. I think you should because you were in the front of the line. I saw you in those Daily Mail pictures.
Yeah,
You
that's true.
you you had something to do with that. I'm not going to
Yeah.
say I'm not going to agree with you when you say I take no credit for that. I think
Okay, I will
all of you
take
should take credit for it.
some credit, but
Okay.
what I will take credit for proudly is, of course, making sure I was on front line of that banner, because there's a couple of reasons for that. One, I wanted to make sure that Davy Boy who was in my possession
Yes.
was in that picture. And I mean, very sure that I was up front and he was visible. But I really wanted to make a statement with that picture that I am out, and I am not changing that anymore. Like this is in the past, I have kind of flip flop back and forth with Scientology.
Mm.
Obviously, not in the past 12 years since I left the last time, but there
Mhm.
have been times where I was on the bubble and I moved out and then went back in because I was, convinced to, or my button was pushed, for helping people. So why don't you join us and come back and help people?
Yeah.
Um, but this was being up front. There was my statement of no, I'm done, and I'm not going to back off, and I'm not going to be change my mind anymore because that is the best way to do it. You
Yep.
know, I
Yep.
can delete these videos that I make if I wanted to, if I was paid off by Scientology or something, or they convinced me to come back. But there's nothing I can do about that picture. That picture is me standing up front with people who are also dedicated in the cause and saying that enough is enough. We're not going to deal with this anymore, and Scientology needs to stop. And that was the message that I was trying to get across in that picture.
Well, you
So
did a great job with it. Did I'm curious, how did it feel? I mean, all the things you just said in terms of the statement you were making, spot on. How did it feel?
when I was a little bit nervous at first.
Mhm.
Obviously, the main thing I did on those 3 weekends was face my abuser. Right, like this is the organization that destroyed my family. It
Mhm.
didn't give me the help that I needed when I was a teenager, and there's a lot of emotions connected with that. But it felt amazing just to once I got over that initial nervousness and started protesting and holding that sign,
Yeah.
the relief that I had was just it was palpable, right?
Yeah.
And it was very empowering. It was honest, and it was how I wanted to communicate, and I think that was the most important thing. The biggest day, of course, was when OSA actually came out, which was on the Sunday, because that
Right.
was that was it was actually kind of funny. It was almost anticlimactic on Friday and Saturday, where there really wasn't any. There was a few like people driving by and taking our pictures or video, like some OSA members, but
Mhm.
there was almost nothing going on. I thought this is very strange because when you watch videos and so forth of other protests all the way back to Anonymous and before that, there's huge involvement with cambacks and um, you know people basically going like putting themselves in your face and trying to intimidate you.
Yep.
And there was of course um, um, with the anonymous stuff, there was all kinds of like investigations and stuff done afterwards to find out who these people were and accusing them of being paid off to be there and so forth.
Mm.
But there was almost none of that. And I was like, well, this is strange. They're not really doing anything. And there was an OSA person and Janet was there and on Friday watching us and getting yelled at by David Miscavige. But it wasn't until a Sunday when there was like very obvious, like we need to stop these guys and distract them
Mm.
when it became very real. And
Okay.
I felt like when I found out these OSA guys were there, that's when I started to get like, do I have what it takes to really face them?
Right.
And it turns out I do, which felt really good. Um,
Yeah.
but I think my most favorite moment was, of course, the comeback with the ninja. If anyone
Yes.
hasn't seen my coverage of it, definitely go onto my channel at PTS for Life and watch the protest of day 3 specifically with the guy who was dressed in all black, wearing rubber boots and covering his face. All you could see was his eyes, had a hood on, and he was cam backing us. And I walked right up to him with my live stream camera and I put it right in his face and proudly took that cam back and took my power back.
Yeah, exactly.
So,
Exactly. And
yeah.
that's, it's not just I don't know. I think we have a pretty friendly audience here, but even into the future with people watching this, phrases like that are not trite for people like us. It actually does mean something significant to take your power back because
Yeah.
we were depowered
Hmm.
and it was a steady campaign of it for years. it's not just in the Sea Org that happens, as you well know, right? It's on a
Mhm.
personal level, it's on a familial level. You don't just have to go into the org to have this kind of abuse happening to you. It's doing TRs as a kid. It's being told to knock off your bank and all that crap.
Yep.
So I wanted to ask,
Mhm.
because the protest, I mean, Jesus, I could talk to you about this for another 3 hours, but I know you want to do a separate content about that. And we did talk about recovery today. So I guess I want to ask, let's kind of go into that. I'm curious about your milestones. I'm really curious from your narrative or from your viewpoint. What do you think were the significant moments over the last 12 years since you did leave it behind to now that were like, I don't know, there's so many ways we talk about it, onion peel layers, or milestones, or cognitions, or as we used to say in Scientology, sometimes when we were Jay and Dean, bognitions. I had a bognition, right? I
Yeah.
saw a guy get RB'd for that. I saw a guy get it's an ethics interview, rollback. I saw a guy get into trouble for saying just that.
Wow.
Stuff like that. So anyway, but what do you think some of your points were?
Yeah, for sure. So obviously the first step when I was down in LA, I was in the Sea Org at the time on the EPF, and the decision I made to leave was the first step. And it was different than other times when I just kind of floated away and I just kind of went off on the periphery and was an inactive Scientologist. I
Mm.
actually told a Sea Org member to go fuck himself. Like, cuz he was, and this was
That was
like,
Hans, right?
yeah, so this was
Yes.
the I think it was the Has of Bridge Publications,
Yep.
which is a very high level organization in Scientology.
Yeah.
Like, you don't do that at all. And that was kind of the point where there's no turning back. And that was my first stand, I guess I would say.
Cool.
Um, and then of course coming out, and I think it was probably at least a year before I really started to look at what had happened to me and so forth. And the first step, of course, has been education. And that's actually about when I started finding your videos, Chris,
Mm.
as well as a few other ones, but predominantly yours. I would watch your Q&A every single Sunday morning.
Mm.
Like, I would wake up in the morning and I would watch these, and it wasn't for any other reason other than because the people who were asking these questions to you were people who were out as well, and were just interested and just wanted to know more. And so you just answered honestly and straightforward. Like, there was almost like there obviously was some emotion, and you were working through your own stuff, but
Yeah.
it wasn't an emotional thing. It wasn't like a forget these guys, and these guys suck and blah blah blah. You were just saying, yeah, this is how it is. And of course your videos were just very logical, and that spoke to me at the time, and it still does to this day.
Cool.
But it was just watching as much as I possibly could, educating
Mhm.
myself.
Did
um,
you read anything? Did you read books?
no, I'm not really a big reader. I like visual content.
Right.
Scientology Going to Scientology school kind of ruined reading for me a little bit.
Oh, I'm sorry.
you know because it's
Uh,
kind of difficult for me to read a book and not stop and look at every single word and clear up.
uh, yeah, that's something to get past. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, and that's something I'm still working on. But
Okay.
I'm also slightly, I wouldn't say properly ADD. I would just say, I find it hard to focus on things for a long period of time, like longer projects or
Yep.
books. I tend
Yep.
to start them and just kind of fade off.
Yeah, I
Um,
don't know anything about that.
no, you're a reader, right?
Yeah, no, I am a reader, but I'll tell you, I am ADHD, and it does impinge on your life, and it does make a difference in your attention span and ability to focus. It's not a joke. It's a real thing.
Yeah.
And when you get some stuff to help with that, and it kind of clears that out, it really helps. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So although I'm not actually ADD, I tend to just get distracted easily. I wouldn't
Right.
say it couldn't be
It's a
diagnosed as
spectrum.
such.
It's a spectrum.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But anyway, just education,
Cool.
learning what things have happened to me. And I guess the first step would be admitting that I was victimized. That's a really hard thing to, especially as a Scientologist or a former
Yeah,
Scientologist, admitting to yourself that you were a victim of something, because victims don't exist in Scientology. It's you did everything to you, or if something bad happened to you, you've done something bad to somebody else. You're responsible for your condition.
that's right.
And so if I'd sit there feeling kind of shitty or sorry for myself, I would just assume that it was because I was wrong or bad. I was bad for leaving Scientology. I was bad for this, bad for that.
That's right.
So getting over that was probably the first step, and then educating myself.
That's a tough one to, that's a tough hill to climb too. I remember that one. That was a tough one because the education, I'm thinking to myself right now, the education is so important there, because when we come out, you know, a lot of us will find stuff, anti-Scientology stuff or stuff put out by ex-Scientologists or whatever, right? Or media reports or going clear. And we go, okay, so it's all bullshit. Okay. But what am I supposed to think now? And if you don't have something new to think with, if you don't put something new there, I'm just, you know, I'm sort of thinking this through, like, you know, it really can stick you, because because you have all these ingrained old action habits and patterns, right? You know, in the brain. And if you're not retraining that thing, it defaults back to those things. And so that struggle can be really hard because of that. There's no victims in Scientology. That's not a small thing. That's like a huge thing in Scientology. Like, there's no victims. And the whole responsibility thing is really laid in with a, as Hubbard would say, with an atomic branding iron, right? So I know, right? I love
I haven't heard
drawing.
that in a long time. Thanks, Chris.
Yeah. Yeah, I'll start talking about wolf and warp next, right?
Oh, God.
I've heard Hubbard say that expression more than anybody else in my life, right? But it's really important, right? And so I think that education part's really important early on, because we do struggle with that, and you're wondering, you know, it's not true, but then you're wondering, well, how am I supposed to think about this, or how would this, what is a correct assessment of my victimization? Am I a total victim? Was I a half a victim? Am I a victim some of the time? How does this even work? You know, so that's a tough one.
Yeah. I'm curious, because I don't know if I've heard you talk about it in a long time. What
Yeah.
was the first steps for you? Like I was just describing. What were your first steps when you got out for that?
It was a couple things. I was kind of just rolling my own thing, right? I didn't know what the hell I was doing. I hadn't read any psychology or any of that yet. I hadn't gotten into really even critical thinking yet. I wasn't yet on that path. I was just trying to figure out, what did Hubbard lay into me that I think is true, that society seems to be telling me right now isn't. And what I ran smack into was the psych stuff, the anti-psych stuff, and the anti-LGBT stuff straight away, because it was all over social media. It's 2013, right? And so tackling those two things became the first test or first thing I tried doing something about. And then after that, I started thinking, well, shit, how do I make sure this doesn't ever happen to me again? Right? Like, once I realized that gay people and LGBT is not psychotic, and they're not all trying to do me in, right? And they're not all a bunch of backstabbing liar, you know, like liar faces and all that, right? Then that really calmed a whole area that I didn't even realize was all stirred up in my head, because it was such a social thing at the time. And then the psych stuff was real good, because I'd been so educated in all the Scientology psychiatric materials. I even read the books, and I didn't just watch all the DVDs that CCHR puts out, the psych stuff, the anti-psych stuff. I think they have about 9 documentaries or something, right? Which are these hit pieces on psychiatry. But I read the books, you know, this psychiatry, the men behind Hitler.
Yep.
right? And the drugging of children one or something, right? There were these two that these guys had written. And so I was fully steeped in all of the Scientology psych stuff. And I had a pretty good idea of the history of psychiatry through that lens.
Mm-hmm.
So I knew I needed to get the other side of that. So I did that and read a whole book on the DSM and psychiatry and sorted some shit out. But I think the real first step, I mean, those were first steps. I don't want to negate those. They were important.
Mm-hmm.
But the first step that put me on the road that I'm on to lead to here today is when I asked the question, how the hell do I make sure I never have this happen to me again? How do I make sure I don't run into a cult again? And that's literally what I Googled. Hey, Google.
Oh, yeah? Really?
Right?
That's awesome.
Yeah. I just, fuck it. Let's try it. Right. And, and what came up? James Randi, Skepticism, the bullshit series by Penn and Teller, all the critical thinking stuff. And Carl Sagan was at the top of the list. And my life has never been the same since.
Cool. I actually think it's funny. I don't think I've ever heard anybody else mention Penn and Teller in the bullshit series.
Oh, yeah.
But I tell you what, that it is meant for entertainment, but boy, those guys are smart.
Yep.
Like the way they present stuff, and it really does make you think and reevaluate what you think is actually true.
Yep.
I mean, from everything, like not just about religion or coercive control or anything like that, but it's pretty phenomenal. So
Yeah.
I've seen all those multiple times. The funny thing with me is I never thought that I was going to get controlled again. Then that thought never crossed my mind. And I don't know if it was just something I decided or just never even thought of now that I think about it. But
just kind of an attitude you sort of had adopted after getting out, like no one's ever doing this to me again kind of thing.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
I don't know if I just, maybe through education, maybe just through watching your videos and various other ones, I just kind of was able to know that it was never going to happen again. But it might just be that I'm just jaded, like, I don't know if it's necessarily a good thing or not. That I instantly, it's not that I don't trust people, but I don't trust groups, and I don't trust like things that other people in large amounts of, like a large amount of people like,
right. Right.
Like if there's something like a trend, no, I'm not into it. Right. Cause I know there's something going on there. And I guess you could almost say it with like Scientology term would be like mob mentality kind of thing, where it's bank think. You know what I mean?
Yep.
And for anyone who's watching, bank think is like think that doesn't actually have logical reasons behind it. It's like a reactive kind of thought process versus really looking at something. And so like an example would be Black Friday sales, to be topical. Like the amount of people who just show up to Black Friday, and as soon as that door opens, start trampling people. Like it is completely illogical to be that crazy over saving $50 on a TV.
Right.
But millions of people do it every year, despite the fact that terrible things happen every time.
Yep.
So anything that is group related, I tend to kind of not trust as much, I guess.
That makes a lot of sense to me, actually. I have similar suspicions, and I have had similar back off on being part of any group. There's only one I've really joined up and, fully set myself up as a member of, right, which was the Secular Hub here in Denver. And I've had similar suspicions. I haven't necessarily thought of it as group think as such, but it's that same concept without those words, right? How people, the meeting of the minds, when it comes to groups, is lowest common denominator kind of thinking. It's like, it's real basic stuff, which is why, it's always like really high or really low group dynamic stuff, right? You can get a group of people really high, you can get them like really pissed off and, mob, turn them into a mob kind of thing. And those seem to be the two things you can do with groups, right? And you look at that and you go, there's probably something dangerous about that. There may be something I should be a little bit more watchful about that, since I'm if I'm going to be part of something like that. And then the other thing that I got super critical of early on, I'm less critical of it now, and I think I've made that clear, I hope. But at the beginning, I was really super critical of religion in general, religious belief in general, right? Because I targeted that as a source of problem, and I could only see the problematic aspects of it, which is very common for people coming out of situations like we did. Did you have any kind of religious animosity develop or thinking in that direction?
I wouldn't use the word animosity. I don't. I would say I'm agnostic. I
Yeah.
don't think that there isn't a God. I don't think that, like, actively think that. I just don't know. I don't know that there is one, and I don't.
Right.
I'm not searching for a God. I don't feel like I need to find a higher power or
Right.
whatever to maybe make sense of my life, if that makes sense, right? Like,
Yeah, totally.
I feel like I am the cause of what I do now. Um, I certainly have my hiccups and so forth for mental health reasons and so forth that get in my way, but I don't think that there's something else that could be conceivably controlling my life that doesn't exist within me, I guess. That makes
Yeah,
sense?
fair enough. That's kind of where I'm coming from.
Yeah.
I also label myself agnostic at this point. The only title I really claim, like that I really kind of like, yeah, this is me, is humanist,
Mm.
Which is a different thing from religious belief as such. It happens to be most humanists are atheists, but that's not necessarily required to be a humanist. It's,
Can
but
you define that for me?
oh, humanist?
Human?
Yeah, here
Yeah.
I'll just pull it up here. It's humanist.
I could invent a definition, but that'd
Yeah,
be
no, it's
against
all good.
Scientology beliefs.
Humanism is a philosophical stance that emphasizes the individual and social potential and agency of human beings, whom it considers the starting point for serious moral and philosophical inquiry. So, yeah, most frequently, humanism refers to a non-theistic view centered on human agency and a reliance on science and reason rather than revelation from a supernatural source to understand the world.
Okay.
Humanists tend to advocate for human rights, free speech, progressive policies, and democracy. And that's where I come from. That's where I live, is all of
Yeah.
that kind of stuff.
How
I
are
don't
the people?
begrudge people anymore their religious beliefs. I used to. I used to think people were kind of, like the whole stupid thing, and you're just not, you're just ignorant or whatever. But over time, that the emotion, of all of that kind of faded. It's kind of like a wave, it comes in and then it recedes. You're like, okay, all right,
Mhm.
we don't have to be quite so harsh about all of religion just because I had a bad experience with it.
Yeah. No,
But
that's
we
cool.
have to be careful, or we have to be. It should be noted that when abuses happen, we don't ignore them either, and
Mhm.
I see too much of that in that world as well. So that's why I still talk contrarily about
Yeah.
organized religion, but you won't see me talk contrarily about religion, and there is a difference between those two things, and I think that's an important difference. But that's been part of my own process, is figuring all that out for myself. um yeah, because religion is kind of a thing for people, you know what I mean? It can be difficult to be critical of it because people
Mhm.
identify so closely with it that they're not willing to hear criticism of it. But criticism of it doesn't necessarily mean that the beliefs are horrible and awful. It just means some people go off the rails with it.
Yeah. I mean, people will go off the rails for a lot of things.
Well, exactly.
Um,
Exactly.
I think I would probably qualify myself as a humanist as well based on that definition. I just think that everyone should have their own opinion and
Hmm.
be allowed to believe it as long as it
Yep.
doesn't hurt anybody else.
Exactly.
It's when it steps over the line of enforcing something on someone else and their beliefs and or their rights or anything like that. I think that's when one needs to fight back against it, whatever it is. Which is why I'm fighting against Scientology, because they did this to me, and I see them doing this to people who are now my friends, and
Yeah.
it's becoming putting myself on the front lines, it becomes very evident how true all these stories are that I've been listening to online, you know? And
Tell me
that's
more
up
about.
until yeah, no, I'm gonna
Okay.
tell you more about that,
Yeah,
Chris.
please.
So like you watch all these stories. I mean, every single channel has them, especially the bigger channels, I should say people, not channels, but the individuals speaking out, like Mike Rinder, Aaron Smith Levin, Leah Remini, like all the larger people who have had these stories of people being fair gamed, PIs going through your trash, etc.
Yep.
Even just dealing with OSA one on one, if you are actively saying something against the church, even though you're not even like, you could be saying basically nothing. If you have any kind of criticism towards the church, they will attack you, right?
Mm.
And so up until I was actually on the front line, other than speaking out on my channel, I've never actually confronted and said my piece, right?
Mhm.
And as
Mhm.
soon as I did, I'm met with this ninja follow me around. Like, this guy, we think we know who he is.
Mhm.
Because due to someone tipping us off who this could be, but he was standing in the dark on a completely pitch black country road, dressed all in black, just staring at us from like 100 feet away. Right? Like, it makes no sense, and it's just, I don't know if it was just trying to intimidate us or what. It didn't work. I went over to him multiple times and just tried to have a conversation with this guy. But all he can do is cam back. He wouldn't say a word. Whereas, interestingly enough, the OSA people did, because this guy is definitely a public.
Right.
Like, he is not a staff member of any kind or a SEERG member. This guy is just a public being told to keep an eye on us.
Right. Because I will say, we should be clear on the fact that OSA uses Scientologists, regular Scientologists, all the time in their operations. It's not unheard
Hmm.
of at all for them to wrangle in local help when needed for things like protests. I've seen it in PAC.
Yep.
So this guy being there like that was pretty wild. It was the whole camo, ninja thing that intrigued me, because none of the other OSA guys and none of the other security, private or otherwise, were doing that. So this guy stands out as a real oddball in this whole thing. Like, who is this guy and why did he feel the need to have to do that? And then, of course, if we know who he is, then maybe that might help answer that question. But damn,
Well, we
weird.
believe
So
we
weird.
believe he was an official at Greenfield School, which is a
Mhm.
Scientology school. He was
Mhm.
wearing a Greenfield's jacket, which, like, because I walk up next to him and I could see, like, there's a patch on his shoulder that says Greenfields on both sides. I'm like, oh, you're wearing a Greenfields jacket. Like, are you insane? Why wouldn't you you're wearing all black. Wear a black jacket with nothing on it. But,
Right.
no one has ever accused these guys of being smart. So,
No, that's true.
and then, of course, facing OSA guys who, like, I used to be in their shoes, speaking out and confronting people who were protesting. So to be on the other side of that
Yeah.
was just super empowering, and it just gave me the full reality of what all these other people who are speaking out against Scientology, they're actually telling the truth. So it's not like, you always have this. They say that like the Scientology people say that all these people are lying, they're bigots, whatever counter words they can use, any kind of propaganda against these people. But once you experience it for yourself, it just becomes so blatantly obvious that it's not true, right?
Right.
And any thoughts that were going through my head um, of them being correct, the Scientologists being correct about what they're saying, completely went out the window instantly. And I think for anybody watching, it went out the window as well. So
Yeah. No, they're definitely it's a pack of deplorables, a basket of deplorables. I don't know what to say. I mean, that's because it's their behavior. It's not who they are. You understand? It's not, I'm not calling these people at their core evil people. I was a deplorable when I was in Scientology. I acted like a fucking asshole all the time, and you're trained to do that, right? Like, that's
yeah,
the only acceptable behavior. the more asshole, the better. And that's
Yep.
and that's weird. It's a weird place to be, man. It's a weird, fucked up place to be inside that world, having empathy and having compassion for people and joining this group because you want to help the world. And then finding out the way to do that is to be the biggest asshole you've ever heard of. It's very backwards thinking, you know. I imagine you and with your OSA experience also ran into that a little bit.
Yeah, and I think it's funny though, because so Alex and I had a lot of these conversations after the protest, trying to kind of debrief and break stuff down. And there's one guy named Luca he's actually the chief security person there. There was almost points before all the rest of the OSA people kind of showed up where we were having a conversation where it almost seemed like he was like thinking about what we were saying versus just like acting or acknowledging and, you know, distracting us. But as soon as when all the other OSA people were really acting up and like really coming in, that's when he kind of shut down, right? Because if you were an OSA or security and you were seen to be contemplating anything, you'd be instantly removed from posts, right? You can't have any doubt. Like OSA people are the hardcorest of hardcore.
Yep.
And somehow they are trained or naturally able just to put their blinders on and completely ignore all the facts that are clearly clearly in view for these people. So I just thought that was kind of interesting.
A big time.
And like he even took an aftermath card, which there's no way, like, and he put it in his pocket.
Wow.
And maybe one day we'll see Luca. I mean, if you're watching right now, Luca, come on out. It's beautiful out here.
It is. It really is. Hey, let me just say something real fast, just because I just noticed this in the comments here. Hey, Lorna, there's a comment here, right? Because somebody knew me in the SO and I wasn't a very nice person. Listen, I just want to take this opportunity to apologize if I, did some fucked up shit to you personally. I am sorry for that. I actually don't remember your name, so I'm that horrible right now that I don't remember.
Typical asshole.
I know, right? But I just wanted to take that moment because anyway, yeah, that's important things for me to say.
Absolutely. And so Lorna is a very good friend of mine.
Oh,
she's from Canada. And actually her story has partially been told. Gabrielle Toth of Escaping the Cultiverse A. She's done an initial interview with Lorna, and
I'm gonna look that up.
Yeah, for sure. I think it was done about 2 or 3 weeks ago, and there'll be more coming as well. But she is a lovely woman, and she also writes books loosely based on Scientology and so forth, science fiction books. And from what I understand, that she's going to be naming a character after Andrea and I. I hope that's true, Lauren.
Cool. All right. So, well, I guess
I'm sure she would sit down and talk with you at some point.
Yeah, I'd like to do that. I have no memory of this at all, and that's not unusual. So,
well, and it wasn't you; it was your teaching.
Well, so, yeah. I mean, that's for sure.
I was an asshole to a lot of people, but I'm actually a fairly nice person to most people now. So, and I think that's a really important thing to mention now that we're kind of discussing that. When I was not necessarily a good person. I did a lot of really dumb stuff, and I screwed over some people, and I almost associate that with the fact that I was in Scientology. Although I am still responsible for my actions, ever since I left, I've been a really nice person. And so clearly there was some sort of infiltration into my personality that was causing me to do these things, whether it was just me acting out or whatever. And that's actually, I guess, been a pretty big part of my recovery too, is looking at my actions and changing my actions so they're more in line with what I feel is my basic personality.
And I agreed. I feel I've been following a similar path, and it's been so many stages of it, so many stages. I mean, shit. Even yesterday, I was having a bit of a moment, because ego is such a. It's so hard to be objective about your own ego.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
it's so hard to see yourself through the lens of other people clearly. Because you got all these things you want to think about yourself. And in Scientology, I feel like the very worst of your personality is being appealed to. I feel like you're encouraged, especially as a staff member in Scientology. Maybe I should qualify it that way, because of the statistics and the pressure and the heat and demand all the time, that people don't, you stop thinking about people as people. Their numbers, their stats, their products,
Yep.
their completions, their VSD. They represent no longer an individual. They represent numbers and dots on a graph. And it feels like after years and years of that, and especially, in the Sea Org, where you're removed from it even to a degree in management and that kind of thing, that makes it even more the case, because then the staff become like that too. Here's these people working their guts out, right, for no pay, dedicating their existence to it. And and I'm thinking, when the stats come rolling in on Thursday, oh, you fucking asshole, you fucked me again, you fucking Albuquerque, you bastards, right? And this would be how Stativ would go for hours. We're cussing out the screens, right? So it's not about people anymore. It's about things and numbers. And I guess where I'm going with that is that once people stop being human beings, they just become something to handle.
Yeah.
I have to go handle this guy. I got to go handle him to stay late to complete his course. I have to handle him to pay this money. I have to, you know what I mean? This phrase, these phrasings we would use.
Yep.
Does any of this ring a bell with you?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. It's just like, yeah, they're terminals.
Yeah,
People
terminals. That's the other word for it. That's right.
Are reverted down to terminals, and they're almost things.
Yes.
They are, and they're like
particles.
Like, for example, like when I was, being a bookstore officer, the product was them buying a book, not them getting educated, not them getting even necessarily the correct book for what they need. They just needed everything.
That's right.
Right. And that was my purpose, and my goal was to get stuff to them, not find out what they need, sell them the correct thing, and ensure they understand it. It was just sell, 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 sell. So
that's right.
I think the actual stat was technically selling them the correct book. But once Miscavige gets a hold of things, it's just they need everything. Even though, and this is going to be something that's above most people's heads who are here, selling when the new materials came out, and then we were selling them all the basic books plus the congresses, which are like the more general overview of certain topic in Scientology, and then also had to sell them the advanced clinical courses, which were like the advanced auditing procedures and all that, like much higher level stuff that nobody in Scientology is going to understand fully and listen to. But I was told to sell them everything, even though it completely doesn't apply to them, because all they wanted to do was make money. Right.
That's right. But it's all in the purpose of, they have to have their whole bridge, right? Because they can't do the bridge without all the stuff. And so it all, adds up in this overall goal of clearing the planet somehow, and it's all rationalized and justified.
Yeah. So that was actually something I would always push back against when the Sea Org terminal who was posted in our org, who was in charge of basically the liaison between myself and Bridge. I would always push back, like, why am I selling this to this person? Like, why am I doing this? What's the point? And she would basically just say, it doesn't matter. Here's the program. This is command intention and all this stuff. So
wow.
I always push back against it. I was a real pain in the ass.
Well, she couldn't even relate it in a pretend way back to the person. That's the attitude I'm talking about right there. It's like you get to this place where you're literally thinking it doesn't matter. Yeah. Just get it done, right?
Well, and you don't have time.
Anybody
don't have time for it to matter.
Well, exactly. And if somebody's getting in your way, suddenly they're a stop, not a person.
Yeah.
Exactly. They're a barrier. right? At best, they're an out ethics particle. I love Amy put that in the, it's like, yes, particles and terminals, right?
Yes. Yeah.
Oh, so bad. But where I was going with that is it got me in a frame of mind, and I was wondering what it did with you, where I just wasn't thinking about people as people anymore. And I think when we talk about that cult personality, or that sort of, you become the cult leader kind of thing, I think that's part of it, is that, in Scientology, at least, I don't know that maps to every other cult the same way, but Scientology specifically has these dehumanizing words, and the way to think about people. And then it basically becomes, people are tools to our means to an end, and that's all they are. Because you've because at least the way I thought about it or justified it to myself was, well, anything I can do to get this person onto and up the bridge is the definition of good. So anything's justified in making that happen. So even if the person himself is saying he doesn't want to do it, fuck this guy. You're going to do it anyway. you know? Like, you just override everything. I know I'm being like super potty mouth today. I'm sorry about that, but that's where it goes, Yeah.
This is real talk, Chris.
Anyway, how did that go for you? Because it took me way longer than it should have. I say in hindsight, right? It takes what it takes, really. But it's hard to overcome that. It was hard for me to overcome that. Let me put it that way. What about you?
Well, so I think one of the reasons why I was really good at my job as a bookstore officer specifically, other things not so much, but is I believed in the tech. So I believed in these books and these lectures contained the correct knowledge for people. And I would take my time to actually get to know my public and sell them the correct things as best I could versus what the program wanted me to do. That made me a pain in the ass because I wasn't just selling willy-nilly.
Right.
I would let's say someone's having problems with morality and so forth. I would sell them the ethics book and the State of Man Congress, like things that were specifically intended to, according to Scientology, deal with that specific area of their life. And so I should have seen people as just particles and terminals, but I tried not to, because I actually cared about these people. These were friends. Like, you got to keep in mind too that I grew up in this organization, literally grew up in it, in the halls, running up and down, and I know these people. And so seeing them other than actual human beings was challenging for me. But then I definitely did bow to pressure as well from, chairman of the board via all these programs that were being written to just mass sell and push that too. But I know that when I was truly being myself and being true to who I was actively trying to get to know people and actually create relationships. You know what I mean? So they would come to me for advice versus avoiding me. I guess.
I would try to do that when I was given the time, right? But
yeah, and I think this is gonna be the difference between you and I, Chris, because you were in the Sea Org, so you didn't have time.
Not
right?
like that.
No, and so that's I mean, although I have heard arguments where being a class 5 org staff member is a little bit more challenging because you have to be on post plus have a job and whatever.
There's some truth to that.
Yeah,
having done
and there
both,
is for sure. But on the flip side, your guys' pressure was so much higher, and the time constraints and everything. Now. But you couldn't escape that. So that was your life. Whereas when 10 o'clock rolled around or whenever post ended, I went home unless there was a major project to happen, an all hands or something like that. I went home and I went to work the next day and I had that break. So I can just appreciate the differences between those two. So I can see your viewpoint on that, to use Scientology.
Well, that was, it's funny because that was even while we now talk about that, we're here framing it as a feature, right? It was able to you to get a break and have a different kind of perspective and still maintain yourself as a personality. And it was funny because, you know, I say I doubled down and I joined the Sea Org when I was 25, right after 8 years of being on staff. And I've never really said, or I don't know that I've gone into the detail of actually what I was really, when I say I was doubling down, I wanted to get away from the WOG life.
Yep.
I was sick and tired of working my ass off at 2 full-time jobs all the time, trying to make Scientology go and having money to pay rent and food and stuff like that. And so I created this picture in my head that the Sea Org was the place where I could distraction free, I keep using air quotes, you know, just do Scientology. It would be like, okay, all these distractions would be off my plate and I could just focus on clearing the planet, you know, with all these other people who were so focused on it. And I don't think I've ever made a bigger mistake in my life. Than that,
I've made a huge mistake.
Huge. Anyway, just as far as motivation, you know what I mean? It's kind of funny because you're absolutely right. That break was almost a mental health break, you know, to get away from the Scientology. And for me, I was like going in I was running in the opposite direction because I was so bloody convinced that L. Ron Hubbard was saying true things when he said we only had 5 years. You know, the only reason the planet was still around is because Scientology existed. You know, I was in that kind of frame of mind.
Yeah.
What was your how serious did you take it? What would you say was your most dedicated time in Scientology?
Well, I mean, it's kind of hard to say that specifically.
Okay.
I would say my last stint, when I was brought back from the edge and I was put on post. I was the exec esto in training in Vancouver. This is in was it 20? It was the spring before I left, so it was about 12 years ago.
Okay.
And
2011, 2012, something like that.
Yeah, well, yeah. So it was 2011 because Andrea and I were together for a year. We had broken up. So yeah, 2011. I was kind of reinvigorated into my purpose as a Scientologist and convinced to join staff again. And I was going to be the exec esto. I had started my training, but because my previous post was bookstore officer and I did really good at it, the person who was in charge of the book sales in Canada, just avoiding some terminology here, but
Right.
her and I were like very friendly towards each other, and she wanted me to replace her on her post to become this high level continental management person. And I was reshown the video about the state of the planet, which is essentially like the zeitgeist film on YouTube that you can see where, you know, like very shocking imagery about how bad things are and the state of the planet. And the purpose of this video, which is I think it's about 2.5 hours long.
Yeah, almost 3, I think, if the one I was using.
Like, and it's hard to watch. Like it is, you got to have a really strong stomach and mind to watch this thing and not like break down. I think it might actually be like a screening mechanism. Like if someone caves in while watching it, they don't want them in the Sea Org kind of thing. Right. That's my guess anyway, man. If this thing could leak and this could get on a website, that would be amazing.
The Zeitgeist film?
No, well, the specific one that they use, the full edit that they use.
Oh, did they have their own special edit?
Yeah.
Oh, because when I was recruiting, we actually used Zeitgeist.
Yeah, so it's not
DVD.
Exactly. So the one that I watched isn't the exact Zeitgeist. It uses a lot of the same imagery, but
yeah.
Anyway, regardless.
No, I just didn't know that they had edited it like that. That's interesting to me because I was using that stuff myself in Sea Org recruitment. I didn't know that had been part of your recruitment.
And maybe it was just the one person who did it themselves. Who knows?
Yeah, maybe.
It was just on their laptop, so I just assumed it was just standard issue for all you recruiters. But
Yeah, no, there's a whole briefing that was a standard issue for a while. We were a Sea Org recruiter in LA put it all together. It was a series of 4 or 5 PowerPoints, and there was an Alex Jones documentary in there. There was the Zeitgeist in there, and there were a couple other things that you could supplement the briefing with to give the full picture to the person.
Yeah.
Anyway,
It's all
I
bullshit.
digress, but please
Yeah.
carry on.
So anyway, so I was given this, and of course that just completely revitalized my purpose to do the best thing for the planet. And I would say, as far as like dogged determinism and pure purpose, that's where I was like the most laser focused. But
Yeah.
it also came apart really quickly once I actually arrived at the Sea Org and started seeing how people were being treated. And
Right.
the attitudes, like when I was in Ontario, it's a very podunk Sea Org base. Like it's not like PAC at
Right.
all. There's
Right.
so few people there. It's really out ethics as far as like scheduling and all that stuff. But once I got down to Bridge, and I was put on the Bridge EPF. I wasn't put in with the regular EPF people. I was treated differently, and I was treated like an actual Sea Org member, and it wasn't treated well. So that's when I was like, yeah, I'm out, because I'm not going to do this for the rest of my life and be mistreated and all that. So yeah.
Right. Okay. Well, let me
That's long-winded.
we've done this wonderful segue onto these things, and I want to see if I can get back to the question I asked you a little bit ago that got us onto all of this, which was your milestones.
Yes. Yeah, so I'd say after education, I and I think this is more of like very recent history
Mm,
now, is listening to stories of other people uh and finding the commonality between what I experienced and what they experienced.
mhm,
Specifically when I reconnected with Gabrielle years ago and learned about her story and what she had gone through, because it had happened just after I had left. I think it was the next year, the year after, something like that.
mhm,
And so I hadn't really been in touch with her, and to find out what she had gone through with the local org that, I knew everybody at, and the abuse that she had gone through, that helped kind of open my eyes to the truth and make it real to me. Because again, this is somebody Gabrielle, who I love dearly, being treated this way. And yeah, it just made it so real, and made me not angry, but like determined not to join again, and like really not ever have anything to do with it.
right.
Um, and then, and on that same vein, is talking to other people, yourself and Alex and, Aaron, just having discussions about the similar abuse, and just kind of relating it to myself, and finding out that actual truth versus what I've been told, or the propaganda that was put through Scientology and about these other people. So if that makes sense.
Right. Right. Yeah, they always have a reframe for you. They've always got some
Mhm.
alternative facts for you, as they say. Um, how has the well coming okay, so that kind of brings us up to now then.
Mhm.
Let me ask you, and I know you're going to do a deeper thing on this and stuff, but just since since it's what we're talking about today, what are your thoughts now, or at least as of today, about the trip and the protest, and what kind of milestone has that been for you, or has it been?
It was nothing. No, I'm just
Yeah, I
kidding.
didn't think so. I
Um,
figured it was no big deal.
oh, was there a protest? I think the important thing for that, and the key takeaway for myself, is that I faced the accuser face to face, or sorry, the abuser face to
Mm,
face, and I saw in myself that I had, I'm gonna say TRs. I know it's not the right word, but that's the only way I can potentially describe it. I was
mhm,
able to keep my TRs in and communicate what I wanted to communicate without backing down or having actual fear. It's unbelievably empowering. And I highly suggest that if anybody has something that they're like, if that they need to confront face to face, that is like abusing them or whatever, it's very empowering just to do it. And it may be scary at first, but once you do it, it just like completely takes any control that that other entity or person or group or whatever has against you and brings it right back onto you. So it's incredibly, incredibly empowering and motivating to do more. And there's lots of stuff that's going to happen. It's going to be a good year. Next year is going to be even bigger. So yeah.
Now I'm like, I can't wait. No, this is very, I want, something I haven't necessarily said publicly. I think I've told you guys privately, maybe. This whole thing, what you guys did, and I am saying you guys, I know Alex organized it and you went over there and all of that, right? So you're downplaying, your role in it, and that's fine. But I do want to say to you both, and I've said this to Alex as well, that it's rejuvenating for me
Yes.
to have seen this whole thing happen, and not just because a protest happened. If it had been an anonymous style protest or a harsh, antagonistic protest, let's say, in the spirit of what some other people have done, I would not feel this way right now. Yeah. It was not just the fact that a protest happened, but that it was an effectively done, well organized, and it was not angry. It was not, about that. Yeah. And yet, it's put on by people who are trauma survivors who have every right to be pissed. See, that's the thing. It's not that protesters don't have a right to be pissed. It's what's going to be the most effective protest. And that's how this was approached. And I was so inspired by that. So I just wanted to put that out there.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that. It does mean a lot that someone of your stature and your presence in this community, which I think cannot be overstated. I think is the right word I'm looking for. Okay. Like you've done so much, and anybody who's watching my channel should definitely look at your content because it's so powerful.
Thank you.
And I think the most inspiring thing for me was actually to be joined by people who were not Scientologists. I mean, there's a few that instantly come to mind, of course, and their dedication to this cause, potentially because of shared trauma or similar trauma and so forth, or just the fact that they don't like people being fucked with, like Scientology does with people. Yep. It's so inspiring because if those folks weren't there, it would have been a much smaller group and it would have been less effective. So the fact that they took the time out of their day and in some cases 3 days in a row, people were there.
Right.
And helping us out in any way and just like standing in the cold and the dark and getting, looks of hatred from Scientologists walking by who they don't know. And frankly, probably would never meet in their entire life if it weren't for this. Right. It was very inspiring. So I'm hoping that next year will be even bigger and we'll be able to create an even bigger effect and all that. So,
well, I hope so. I mean, I hope so because I'm planning on being there. So I hope that
let the cat out of the bag there.
Yeah, no, I am. I already talked to Alex about that. I'm very inspired by what you guys did. It was very rejuvenating and it was very inspiring. That's the word. That is the word. All right.
I will be there as well.
So. Now, in terms of recovery, getting back to that.
Yes.
What have you noticed, or have you noticed anything in terms of personality changes? Because we talk about, we want to help people. We want to do good. We always wanted to do that. That kind of is a steady thread for you through your narrative. But were there personality changes post Scientology that you've noticed over these years?
I would say I'm more compassionate towards people who have problems.
Mm,
Like I've often said um, that when I was in Scientology, I felt like a bit of a psychopath in that
really?
I didn't allow myself to feel these emotions.
Right.
And like I even remember very vividly, like if I was, let's say I was dating someone and they were upset or someone was having some like quote unquote misemotion, crying or depression or whatever, I would not feel empathy for them or even sympathy because but like actively not feel it because sympathy
Right.
and empathy are low toned
Right.
and
Right.
it's it's bad to give credence to those emotions in
Yep.
someone else. Like you're
Yep.
by enabling this for someone, you're actually driving them further down tone and making them worse off. So my ability to um, relate to people and feel for them is probably the biggest change in myself that I've noticed. And I assume that my wife Andrea would notice because she's been with me this entire time since I got out. Um, and then my patience for people as well. Like in Scientology, you don't have patience because it needs to be done now.
Right.
Actually, it needs to be done yesterday. What's
Right.
taking you so long, right?
Exactly. Yeah, now is too late.
Yeah. Wait, you're not done. You're not done already. Like I just told you to do this. Why aren't you done yet?
That's right.
And so my ability to have patience and the thing that I'm working on the most right now is the ability to have patience with myself, to accept the fact that I'm not going to be perfect right away at things. And I may never be perfect at things. I may never be fully recovered. And if I make a mistake, it's because I made a mistake, not because of anything else.
Right.
And I can always fix that kind of thing. So,
Makes sense. Did
yeah.
you ever buy into the whole standard tech, there's only one right way to do a thing approach that Scientology kind of puts there?
Oh, yeah. I mean, obviously, with KSW,
Mhm.
you read it over and over again. And so, when I was kind of raised in it, it's kind of all I knew, right? And so, yeah, I would definitely think that there was only one way to do things, and Scientology was the only way.
Mhm.
Anything else was just either squirrel tech um, or just something like other fish to fry. It was another way to distract you or pull you off mission, sort of
Right.
thing.
Right.
Um, yeah.
Yeah, it took me a while to get over that one. I didn't realize that was a landmine until it exploded a couple times.
I like to
Yeah.
comment on this ex
Yeah,
Scion
that's right.
because I am for 20 years a professional window cleaner.
That's right.
And so when I went down to do my product zero, which is the first courses on the EPF, and you're told to wash a window with newspaper, when I've been washing windows for 20 years, I had so much disagreement with that. And I actually argued with the course supervisor about it and said, this is not true. This is not the best way to clean a window, you know? And that was actually, funnily enough, it's so small, but this is one of the things when I was down there that started to click a little bit with me like, what am I doing down here? So I thought
Yeah,
it was pretty funny.
that's funny. That is funny. Yeah, it took me a while to get past that one. That was a weird one for me. Because I was so sure. It was almost like a philosophic principle for me. Because had you ever heard Hubbard screaming the class 8 lecture? Standard tech defined. Did you were you ever at a tape play for any of those for that lecture?
I probably have, but
It's a
often I fell
lecture that
asleep
was
during them.
usually played to tech people. It wasn't
Mm,
generally played broadly, so not everybody necessarily would have heard this. But it's a lecture where L. Ron Hubbard loses his shit on
mm,
the students at the top of his lungs. It's one of the few places you will ever find L. Ron Hubbard absolutely tearing into people on tape,
mm.
and at least in a public way. I'm sure there's plenty of recordings and at gold of Hubbard losing his mind. But he tears into them. And I probably heard this lecture about 5 or 6 times over the years. And it was always because we were in trouble because we weren't doing it right. Yeah. And there is only one right way to do standard tech, right? The one right way. And there's a million wrong ways. And once L. Ron Hubbard is screaming at you about this repeatedly, the message definitely comes home. And of course, I have to say, right? Of course, right now, I'd say, L. Ron Hubbard screaming, who cares? But when I was in Scientology, this is the guru. Mm-hmm. And he's screaming at you. Like, this is important. So I adopted it as a life principle. There's only one right way to do anything. And that's the kind of mind fuckery that sticks with you for a while, it's because it's not obvious. It doesn't present itself as something that needs to be gotten rid of. It sounds like it makes sense until you run into something where it just doesn't make any sense at all. Were there any things like that for you?
I mean, I disagreed with the biggest thing I ever disagreed with was psychology and psychiatry being the worst things.
You disagreed with that stuff?
Well, so I did because, I mean, when I was kind of quote unquote out, and I was hanging around people who were getting psychological treatment and so forth, I didn't see it lining up with what I was taught. Right now, it's not to say that I didn't agree with psychology, or I didn't agree with Scientology's view on psychiatry and psychology. I just there was always that little like, but what if? Are you sure about that?
Right.
And I remember having a conversation with my dad, who was the executive director of CCHR as an adult, and I said, and I don't know how it came up exactly, but we were talking about that all psychiatry and all psychology and all counselors and everybody being bad. And I just said, but how is this possible? Mm-hmm. Like, that can't be possible. And my dad is such a fervent believer in that fact, quote unquote, that he just shuts down any conversation. Like, for the record, my dad is quote unquote clear. And if he doesn't want to talk about something, boy, does he shut down quickly, which is very unclear, right? Like just the other day, I was texting back and forth with him about a medical issue he's having, and he just says, I don't want to talk about it. Okay. Like, he will just have no conversation. And so that was kind of how that conversation went, is I was trying to like rationalize this with him and have an actual like one-to-one conversation about it. But because of the belief is so strong and so stuck in there, he wouldn't even discuss it. There's just no possibility. And so that's probably the biggest thing that was hard for me to like actually get behind further on in my career. It's one of the reasons why I left as well, and now able to see the truth that they're not all bad. Not to say that there aren't bad, but they're not all bad because they are a psychologist or whatever. It just makes no sense at all.
No, it was a weird idea. I remember thinking myself in relating to what you're saying there, that I had an unacceptance, despite being as steeped as I was in all the literature of it in Scientology. I figured there were like these extreme leader Hitler types or something in charge of psychiatry at the top or something.
Oh yeah. 100%.
But I couldn't imagine that every single one of them was an evil being. And nobody ever let me in on the whole Farsec thing when I was in Scientology. I didn't read about that until after I got out. That's really, like minutia in Scientology. I never met anybody. I maybe a handful of people who even would have had access to that information, and they certainly weren't sharing it with any of us at the lower levels. So I never had the idea that psychiatrists were all from a place called Farsec or something, or all their thetans came from this evil planet or something. Mm-hmm. But I guess I just figured, okay, we'll hurry up and finish. I guess I just figured
hurry up and finish.
that,
Brad.
that they had been indoctrinated so badly in all this evil stuff that was why they were, you know, like I guess you could say I thought of them as so horribly misguided that they had gone over to the dark side or something, and that was the only way I could think of them in the Scientology sense of how to think about them. You know,
that's interesting.
Yeah.
Because I mean, I guess I had the belief and the upbringing that they're just all bad.
Right.
Every single one of them.
Right.
And the only person who would choose that as a career is an antisocial personality or suppressive
Right.
person.
Yeah,
Like that's why they choose it.
I had met a few who I knew weren't that, and so that's what threw me was my experience of it versus what Hubbard was saying. You know.
Well, and I used to like date. You know, I'd be dating as a teenager or young adult, and I remember this one girlfriend of mine. She did psychology, and she in school, and she came over and we watched A Clockwork Orange as part of her psych course. And I'm just thinking, like, am I doing something wrong here? Am I like committing an overt by watching this movie because this is part of a psychological text? You know what I mean? Like,
right.
It's as ridiculous as that. So
Yep. Guilt by association, all of that. That's right. Yeah, you can't be tainted by any of that psych stuff.
No, of course not.
I mean, to the point that I worked at a company, and I know people are going to have different views of this, and this is not something I would actually endorse now as a pet owner, okay? But not for this reason, not for the reason Scientology has for it, which is why I'm going to tell you the story. Mm-hmm. So I was getting an ethics interview as a staff member in Santa Barbara, class 5 staff, by an RTC staff member. And on the meter, who was asking me about my job. And I worked for a animal kennel and a trainer, and he was a Scientologist, and he had this dog kennel and he trained dogs. And the way he did it, or one of the things he would do, was this thing called invisible fence, which is a wire laid out around your property, and it's got a signal, and a dog wears a collar, and if the dog's collar comes near that wire, it's going to give the dog a little electric shock. Mm-hmm. And it's enough. I felt it, and it does hurt. It's not going to cause a scar or anything like that. It's not that bad, but it's bad enough that it's causing pain to the dog. And I don't think now that that's a way I would deal with my dog. But at the time, it was a job, and I was working for a Scientologist. And so I'm getting on the meter with this RTC staff member who I described this job to, just like this. And she looks at me and goes, "Fucking psych." Just out of nowhere, right? And I'm like, psych? No. Like, I'm suddenly like, and this is an RTC staff member accusing me of this in an ethics interview. So
she was calling you a psych.
I feel like I'm about to get declared, like, this is bad. And she's like, oh yeah, no, this is psych oriented. You're using electricity. And she just immediately made that connection when in fact, of course, it has nothing to do with psychiatry. But that's the kind of, dot connecting that goes on in that world, anything tainted by anything connected with anything that could be connected with psychiatry is automatically evil and must be destroyed. And it's so interesting that it's almost at a level of, I hadn't really thought about it this way before, but it really is almost at a level of paranoia, institutional paranoia.
Yeah.
Within that group.
Yeah, I'm actually quite surprised to hear.
What's that?
I'm surprised to hear that story in regards to an animal, which, like, I don't even with my views on, or my dad's views, I don't know if I'd get that connection. That person was very.
Oh yeah, no, she immediately. I mean, it wasn't even like it was just psych. Ugh. And it was just like any little thing they could get me on, right? Because I dared to order, query an order from COB, so I was toast, right? And they were going to find anything they needed to make me toast. Anyway, came back to recovery. Yeah, I guess I just want to ask now. I mean, I don't know. We've been at this for a little while, and I don't necessarily want to keep going blow by blow, but I guess I just wanted to ask kind of overall, when you look back over this 12 years and over your time here, right? What do you see yourself now as different from how when you were in Scientology? How would you describe the difference there?
I would say I'm a human being.
Huh?
I want to do things that make me happy and other people happy. I want to help people out. I want to get to know people. I want to just enjoy life and not worry about whether the planet's going to be a dwindling spiral for the next endless trillions of years. You know, like it's just so mind-boggling how extreme it is. And thinking back on it now, I can't comprehend believing it. Right.
Right.
Like my level of thinking is so far away from that I can't even comprehend getting back to that point.
Right.
Which is really good. I think that's a really good, healthy place to be.
Yep.
And then for myself, like my goal, I guess, moving forward is, of course, to keep, doing this YouTube channel and speaking out. And I've got some people who are actually going to be coming onto my channel and telling their story for the first time, which I feel is really empowering for them and empowering for myself, for the whole cause of anti-Scientology, because one more voice, one more familiar voice for someone to hear now or in the future, permanently put on the internet is super important. And so that's what I want to continue doing, but also learning more about myself and psychology and other coercive control groups and so forth. And I think, and I've said this before, but like one really big aspect, and it's not sexy, but one really big aspect that's missing in this sphere is the recovery, and the mental health aspect, because first of all, it's really hard to talk about mental health issues. As someone who suffers from them daily for myself, I know this to be true. It's very difficult to just walk up and say, hey, I kind of feel like, not being alive anymore, or I'm really upset with myself, or I don't feel confident in something. Like, it's really difficult. And if I can do anything to help someone get to that point where they can do that, and if I can be someone that they can listen to or talk to, then I think that's kind of my purpose and my goal right now.
Perfect.
But the more that I can learn about helping someone, the better, and the more voices I can put out there, the better. So, yeah.
Well, good.
Yeah, I think it is pretty good.
Yeah, I think that's a good place to be. And of course, I agree with everything you're saying. Right back at you.
Well, I mean, you've been doing that for quite a while, so
I have, and it's.
And I am looking into like potentials for. I mean, I don't think I'd ever get a full degree or anything at this point, but peer counseling of some sort of education in it, so that if someone does come up to me and need help, then I can, actually do it in an effective way versus just like bumbling around. But
sure. Absolutely. Well, I more power to you in that goal, in achieving that goal. I also said I was never going to have letters after my name, and then the opportunity presented itself.
Yeah.
And I took it, right? I never thought I would get that opportunity, and when it came, it was completely unpredicted. So I hope the similar things will happen with you. And I think that there's a lot more we could talk about with this in terms of all the little deets of the bits and pieces of this recovery. And I'm glad we did this talk today to kind of cover your journey, your side of this,
Yeah. And I think we'll just have to do it again sometime soon.
Yeah, exactly.
Did you want to take up you have time for a few more comments, questions?
Do it. Absolutely.
I got a whole bunch started, but we'll
bring them all. I'm in no hurry here.
We'll rip through them. I would like to start off with saying, if you're still here, Mary, hello. You are a lovely person and a fantastic supporter of not just my channel, but others. So thank you. This is Mr. Brad himself, Ubik, who potentially is asleep right now because he's in the UK. Hopefully you've stayed awake, Brad. Thank you again for being a huge part of the protest. He was security for us, and he helped a lot, including when my voice was going, he gave me some lovely ginger tea and grabbed my umbrella and held it for me and supplied a power bank so we could keep streaming. So he's a huge supporter. Thank you much, Brad.
Big time. Thank you, man.
Jen Sell, well done, you, Jeff. Welcome home. Thank you. I am very happy to be home, by the way. As much as I loved hanging out with Alex, he is a great person. But I did miss my dog, and I missed Andrea very much. I'm glad you, as far as one can tell here, have wonderful support from Andrea and others. I do. I want all the content she feels like sharing. Yeah, so just on that point, Andrea has done, I'm not sure if you've seen my shorts or not, Chris, but we've put out a few, and a few of them have been from Andrea. And they're just messages directed at Scientologists specifically.
Oh.
So
cool.
It starts off with Dear Scientologist, and it's basically just kind of saying things that I would respond to when I was in, like, you don't have to give away all your money. It's not out ethics to think about your mental health, etc. So very like specific targeted messaging and quick content that's directed at Scientologists. So
Great.
Judging by the fact that it gets the most dislikes of all my videos, I think that it might be reaching some Scientologists.
That's the spirit.
Yeah. That's the way I look at it.
Hey, planting those seeds, man. That's how it works. It's planting seeds. That's how it works. If anybody watching this thinks that you have a single one and done conversation with somebody and it's all over, I'm just going to tell you right now, that's not the norm. That's not how this usually works.
Yeah.
That's a very unusual thing to have happen. It takes time for people to unwind from this stuff, and to even start letting it go. So anyway, just saying that.
It can be 10 years of messaging.
Yeah. It was for me. It was for me. Exactly. It was 10 years. So
it just takes one, though, to really push it over the edge.
Right.
And just to bring up the last part of this comment, did you sleep for a week? No, I have barely slept at all. It's kind of annoying. I'm very jet lagged right now. I didn't have any jet lag going out there, but I sure as hell had some coming back. So I'm hoping to sleep really well tonight for the first time since I got back. But that's only been a couple days. So I would like to specifically say hello to Claire. She was also on the front lines with us for 2 of the days.
Wow.
And
hey, Claire.
We're going to be having a chat sometime soon once I get my life all in order and
Good.
talk about her experiences. Wow, Chris Shelton would be wonderful to talk to for the newbies that are coming out of Scientology. I agree. And in fact,
I'm here.
perhaps I would encourage you, sir, to take a look at your past library and perhaps reissue it or in a different form in order to speak to people who are coming out currently, because older content won't necessarily get pushed as much as newer content. So it might be worth and only because I feel that your stuff has been so valuable for me in my education coming out. So
absolutely. And you'll see me focusing more on recovery on my channel, as we're doing today for this exact reason. Awesome. So cool.
Amy, hello, if you're still here. Thank you for the welcome, and thank you for the amazing gift that you sent. I will be debuting it once we have our chat. And for everyone who's watching, I will leave it at that.
Ooh.
Nancy, thank you very much for the super chat. Jeff, your interactions with the ninja were hilarious. Love the whole weekend. You and Alex rocked it. Much love for St. Hill, Washington. I'm going to guess that's like Clearwater, Washington, probably just around the corner. Thank you very much, Nancy. That's much appreciated. Oh, Claire. I do my best. I'm not sure why I clicked this exact one, but I have been through some crazy stuff, so always try to be understandable. Oh yeah, right. Yes, it is really important to recognize that other people have their story and try and relate it to yourself, and that really helps to for you to understand where someone else might be coming from.
Yeah.
Brad, Nancy, Alex, and Jeff are a pain in the butt. Yep, pain in the butt in real life. He had to feed us chocolate and tea to keep them calm. Yeah, that's actually the only reason why the protest went off so well, is all the chocolate and the tea.
That makes sense.
Yeah, yeah. All right. We have a question here from the SP Chef. Did you feel a sort of relief finding out that by watching other stories like yours that you actually are not the crazy one, but Scientology is? I would love to hear your answer to this, Chris.
Yes, I will say absolutely. I'm nodding right now. It was it's a succession of waves of realizing that you're not the crazy one, because there's a lot to the Scientology mindset, and it kind of keeps hitting you, especially in the early years coming out, right? But you know, like I said, all the way to yesterday, I mean, I still have shit happening. After a while, you start questioning whether it was, you know, you're recovering from a cult experience, and then after a few years of that, then you start wondering whether you're just running into real life, regular life stuff that everybody runs into, or is it cult stuff? And I think that's a good place to get to, because then you're sort of like, oh, I'm so past this now that I'm having to start having real problems that real people have. You know what I mean? Not just the super specialized, I'm a you know, weirdo because I have all these weird problems. Now I can integrate to having normal problems, you know, like middle-age crisis and stuff like that. That has nothing to do with the cult, right? So I think that's part of the process for sure. And and the other thing I'll say on this one is watching other stories like mine that were not Scientology. That really threw my perspective for a loop and helped so much to remove so much of the stigma connected with being an ex-Scientologist in my own mind, and the sort of, you know, weirdo sort of idea that I would assign to myself, that I would assume other people would think about me because of who I am and what I've been through, right? So so seeing that happens in other groups too, and other people go through the same thing and they never even heard of L. Ron Hubbard, was a big relief. So that's my answer.
Yeah, and I would 100% agree with you and say the same thing as, and I would reiterate with the other groups being similar. Like, obviously, you've covered a lot of cults and similar cultic activity and coercive control groups, and all this stuff on your channel. And I think recognizing that you're not the only one is super important, and it helps you to understand more deeply why you might have fallen for things, and what you can do to not fall for it again, I guess, would be the important lesson to take from that.
Well, also in that, isn't there some comfort in knowing that other people in totally disrelated areas can fall for the same shit you do, right? So it's like, oh my God, I'm not actually such a weirdo, and I'm not actually so stupid, and this isn't so weird. They did it too, right? There's a comfort to be gotten in that, I think, in a weird way.
Yeah, it's like, I'm not, and you know, to be very crass about it, I'm not the dumbest person in the room kind of thing, or I'm not the only dumb person in the room. You're not dumb for falling for it. I don't mean to imply that, but like, that's what you're kind of thinking. At least that's what I would think to myself. Like, okay, I'm not the only one. And so
Yeah.
that does make you feel a lot better, for sure.
Yeah.
Because there's so much self-deprecation that happens from being in this situation, to the point where it just has this whole stigma attached to it, where you can't even talk to people about it, right?
That's
And so you
right.
just sit there and you suffer in silence and suffer in silence, and you just dig yourself deeper into a hole. So
That's right.
hearing other people's stories and relating to them means that you are not alone. And I think that's the first step in any kind of healing for mental health, is to recognize that there's at least, you probably know at least 10 more people who are dealing with the same thing that you're dealing with,
That's
even if
right.
you have a small circle of friends.
That's right.
So just
In
reach
one
out. And
fashion or another.
I'm sure they will understand if you reach out to people. Amy Scobie, you again. I want to do a video with Alex, Jeff, and Gabrielle so we can have UK, US, and Canada all represented. And it would be fascinating to me to ask all of my local org type of questions. Yeah. Let's set it up, Amy. I am wide open. I'm just trying to get my life back in order since being back. So, but I would love to have a chat sooner than later. Xyan, are you as zealous about informing people about the bad things in Scientology as you were about the good things when you were in?
Yeah.
Well, I would say for me, I might actually, so I never really liked talking about Scientology with people who weren't already Scientologists. I had a lot of, to use the Scientology term, back off on it. Um, I just, I felt embarrassed all the time saying I was a Scientologist, which is kind of funny to hear, probably someone who's been, so dedicated to Scientology for a lot of his years. But I knew how weird it was. I knew how unaccepted it was in society. And so I didn't really want to talk about it. So I would say my answer to this is I'm more zealous about it, about exposing them, than I am promoting them. What about you, Chris?
I'd say I was, and I would say that I'm not now. And I think that that's a good thing. And the reason why is because of the word zealous.
Okay.
And it's no hit on NX Science. You've been asking me questions for years. It's that is the right word to use, because from my experience, when we come out, we're still the same person. We've just flipped the belief set 180 degrees. But the personality is the same, the goals and intentions are still the same, and the thought patterns are still the same, because you're still in the cult until you get yourself extricated from all of that. And so I see this in the atheist community. I've seen this in other ex-cult communities, as well as the ex-Scientology community, that you get out and you hit the road running, right? I did. There was no lag in me. And I know a lot of people will, before they go public or start telling their story or something, there can be a break, or there can be a time where they're processing and figuring things out. I didn't do that. I just went right in. And so I was still the same. And everything I'm saying applies to me as much as anybody else. I was still a Scientologist. I was just an anti-Scientologist. And I'm not that anymore. And it took a while to get there, right? As it does with everything with this. So I think that used to describe me. And I don't, and please understand that this isn't a matter of I don't think we should be vigorous and energetic about what we're doing. But zealous has a connection to it of sort of unthinking extremism.
Yeah.
And that's no longer part of my thinking. If I can tamp it out or find it or see it, I stop it, right? Because I don't want to be extreme about pretty much anything. And so that's how I would answer that question. I don't know if that comes across well.
Yeah, no, I get it. So just to clarify, if you replace the word zealous with motivated, would you say that applies a bit more, or like is it the difficulty with a zealous word is like the main thing? Like, because it seems to me that you are still very, very motivated.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Cool.
That's a great differentiation, and it is the word zealous. Yes. So thank you.
Yeah.
I get all wordsmithy sometimes.
Of course.
Because clearly, there isn't anything wrong with being motivated to have a goal and a purpose, and that's emotional needs. That's basic to us. So I don't think there's anything wrong with that.
I think a really cool. I forget who was talking to us about, but on the subject of motivated versus zealous, or being a zealot, or just like unthinkingly fighting against something, I'd say would be the definition that I'm
That's right.
referring to. Is so I'm motivated to do this, but I also have a life. And
Right.
so, like, who was it I was talking to? Can't remember that. Anyway, it was someone recent I was talking to that they. Oh yes, I remember now. Okay, so yeah, so she had a life, and so she has friends, she has things to do, and so the videos don't come out as often as perhaps other people. And that's not to say the person isn't having as much impact. There's just a
Mhm.
bit more meaning behind the videos that are put out, right?
That's
And I
right.
think that's important because the motivation is there, but there's also motivation to live life because I think, and it's something I've been thinking about with myself lately, is I almost feel like I never left Scientology.
Mm.
I'm not a Scientologist, but I've never actually left Scientology, which
Mm.
is kind of a funny thought.
First got out, and when I was first doing videos for the first many years, it
Mhm.
was a mission.
Mhm.
I was on a mission. I'm not anymore. That's the difference, right? Because I'm motivated. It's a job. It's something I want to do. I'm doing this because I love doing it. And it's
Yes.
not just Scientology anymore. Scientology to me has been filed in, and that's where I lost the Scientology part, right? Is when I was able to look at Scientology as just another one of the cults.
Yep.
It's not the big one. It's not the most important one. It's not anything special about it, except perhaps how much it fucks with you mentally. That's that's where Scientology shines. But otherwise, it's just another cult to me now. And I think that differentiation for me with this question is that dividing line.
That's really cool.
Yeah,
That's awesome.
yeah.
We are nearing the end of our time in our comments, but there's a couple more. Danielle, I'd just like to say hello. Danielle Chamberlain was kind enough to host us, Alex and I, one night when we came up to visit, and we visited the Sunderland org.
Hi, Daniel.
Uh, she's an amazing person, and Nev is amazing as well. So thank you very
Yep.
much. Um, Ego Next Door with Jennifer
Gotcha.
Hashaya. Hachia.
Yeah.
Um, I would love to chat with you. Um, it looks like you have a podcast of some sort, and I
Mhm.
would love to chat with you. So if you want to email me at iamPTS4life@gmail.com, you can find my email as well on my channel there. 100% would love to chat with you. I would like to talk with more people and get the story out as much as possible.
Yep.
And then I'm going to end off with a fun one here. Jeff, heavy mess worker. Why isn't Jeff wearing his clout goggles? If anyone doesn't know what the heck we're talking about, I'm going to share my screen with you. Do do do. And there it is. This is actually something that Andrea made up for. This is a tabloid. You can find this on my Twitter, which is PTS for life. Clout goggles are the goggles that Alex and I are wearing right here. And it's just kind of a joke because Scientology is telling people that Alex is a clout chaser, and so we just ordered up these clout glasses so we can really show off our clout. If we're gonna be clout chasers, we might as well look cool doing it.
Awesome.
It's all very fun. I like to have fun. I like to make sure that Scientology knows that whatever the heck they are doing, they are not affecting my mood whatsoever, because I'm no longer under their control.
Nice.
Chris,
Nice.
this has been really fun.
Yeah, I thought so too. Thanks
I
for
think people enjoyed themselves. I
yeah.
sure hope they did. Um,
Seems
as
like
one
it.
last point, I would like to suggest that if anybody would like to support either of our channels, make sure you are liked and subscribed. Do keep in mind that YouTube has been unsubscribing people lately, kind of in this weird thing. So double check your subscriptions. Make sure you are
Mhm.
still subscribed to us. Click the
Yeah,
notification
my
bell.
channel as well. Check it out, because don't assume. YouTube's got some weird stuff going on behind the scenes right now.
I was unsubscribed to a couple channels as well, which I've resubscribed to. So do check that out. If you would like to support either of us financially in our bid to conquer the world against Scientology, you can buy myself a coffee. My link is in my description. And Chris, as we've already ascertained, has all the things.
All the things.
Please check him out. Buy his book. And we're going to plan something real soon. Chris, thank you very much for joining me. Everyone in the chat, thanks for joining us, and we'll see you next time.
Bye, guys.